Starring John Travolta and Robin Williams as lifelong friends and business partners, Old Dogs is the story of Charlie Reed and Dan Rayburn, two successful New York businessmen who are about to land a major deal with a Japanese corporation. And then comes the start plot. One day, an old fling from Dan's past re-emerges with a big surprise. He's apparently the father to her two bastard twins. After some not-so-hilarious circumstances force both the mother and the only other caregiver out of the picture, Dan finds himself as the unwitting babysitter of his own children for 2 weeks, in the middle of this huge business deal. And then, like any good Disney film, the hilarity ensues for the entire middle act of the movie, with one hilarious contrived plot device after another. Dan accidentally sets fire to a children's campground? Hilarious. The kids accidentally get Dan and Charlie's medicine mixed up, resulting in some unfortunate side effects in a public setting? Hilarious. Dan gets locked in a crazy spray-on tanning booth for too long and comes out looking like an Oompa Loompa? Hilarious. A poorly conceived breaking and entering into the Burlington, Vermont Zoo that ends up with our heroes in the gorilla pen? Hilarious. Charlie and Dan make some vague reference to being soulmates and another adult mistakes them for being homosexuals? Hilarious. But let's be honest here, this is a live-action Disney family comedy with Robin Williams. It's pretty much exactly what we all expected. In some scenes, actually exceeding my expectations, specifically the first 20 minutes of the film, which were surprisingly fresh and laugh-out-loud funny for a few moments. But once the movie settled into its old and busted "surprise, you're a dad" plotline, things really slowed down. Predictable, unfunny, pointless, and poorly written are all fine adjectives for this film. But the one adjective that stood out, and the one that upset me the most, is unbelievable. The entire premise of the film is hinging on the fact that Travolta and Williams are supposed to be these over-the-hill businessmen past their prime, constantly being mistaken for grandparents. Now, Travolta was a guy we just saw most recently in The Taking of Pelham 123, where he was a gripping and menacing terrorist in the subways of New York. And now you want us to believe this 56-year-old man is the gay grandparent to some 7-year-old twins? Sure, both of these veteran actors have been around since the 70s, but neither one of them even has that much gray hair. The failing premise and poor writing aside, Old Dogs may delight some younger viewers who don't mind seeing a movie that literally amounts to nothing more than one slightly humorous gag after another slightly humorous gag for 88 minutes. And on a sadder and slightly more interesting note, although released over a full year after his untimely death, Old Dogs does feature a brief posthumous appearance by the late Bernie Mac, playing a charismatic puppeteer and entertainer. Although it's far from Bernie's best work, it was nice to see him one last time on the silver screen. Anyway, that's what I thought about the movie Old Dogs. Now let's see what you guys had to say in the YouTube comments. A Dino64 wrote, "Funny and exciting for a family movie, but the plot seemed like it had been used before too many times, and I felt like I'd already seen all the good jokes in the trailer. 6 out of 10. Christopher Kemp wrote, "All the funny parts were shown in the trailers. The plot is pretty boring, and it was hard to watch the whole thing. 4 out of 10. Okay, so it's obvious that no one really loved this film, but let's see how Old Dogs did on the Rate-O-Matic. A 4 and a 6. As crummy and as terrible as I thought this movie was, there were a few parts that genuinely made me laugh out loud. And it kind of redeemed itself for me. I had to score it a meh. You guys, on the other hand, were a little bit more forgiving, obviously swayed by the few good parts of the movie to overlook the many bad parts. You guys scored it a good."